So let's talk about what subject to is. I want to make this super simple so everybody can understand this. Subject to is really not like a difficult concept to understand. And I feel like I can probably break it down into two separate sentences. So if you're doing a subject to agreement, you're taking over the payments of an existing mortgage. The loan stays in the seller's name and they deed you the property. That's literally what subject to is. So you're purchasing a property subject to the existing mortgage, which stays in the seller's name, and they deed you the property. Now, if you want to get into the nitty gritty and the agreements and all that stuff, the servicing companies, the third party and everything, that gets a little bit more tricky. But to understand what subject to is, it's very simple. Did that provide clarity for anybody that was curious about what subject to was?
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Hopefully this is super simple. I think that it's really accurate. I took some time to think about it, and I don't think that it could get more simple than this, but it's really not a complex thing to break down and understand. I don't know, like I know it's super overwhelming and like intimidating because that's where I was at when I didn't have mentors or anybody to show me like this kind of stuff, and I was trying to figure it out all on my own, but it's really simple. So, is there any questions on this before we hop into what seller financing is?
I have a question.
You said, and they deed you the property. What exactly does that mean?
So that means that you actually have ownership of the asset. So there's a difference between the mortgage and the deed of a property. So the mortgage is like, let's say, this isn't my example, but this is what Pace would say. Pace would say, let's say you go to the store and you buy some bananas at the store, all right, and you pay for the bananas with your credit card. So the bank is giving you a loan on credit to purchase the bananas, and you pay the bank back, but you own the bananas. The bank doesn't own the bananas, right? You walk
Right.
out with the receipt, and nobody checks you and says, "Hey, how did you pay for the bananas?" Right? They're your bananas. You bought them. You just didn't use your own money. You used the bank's money.
Got it.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
So in that
Yes.
scenario, the deed is the receipt. And let's say that you give the receipt to somebody else. It's their bananas, but you still pay for it. They just have the receipt to prove that it's theirs.
Thank you.
Hopefully that was like, did that bring clarity to anybody? I feel like when I wrote that, it really was like an aha moment for me because it was like, wow, this is so simple. I could write it in 2 sentences.
I think that was a good analogy.
Perfect.
Yeah, dude, you nailed it.
That was great.
Awesome. Next up is seller finance. So this one is also super, super simple. I don't know why, like, I thought it was really, like, difficult to understand. I think it's just intimidating because it's something new. But pretty much this is what seller finance is. You make payments to the seller over a period of time, and the seller becomes the lender. So they become the bank. Let's say that a seller owns a property free and clear, meaning they don't have a mortgage. They're not making payments to the bank. They own it. It's theirs. All they have to pay is taxes and insurance. So in that situation, let's say that a seller wants more than what the house is worth for whatever reason. Maybe, they think that the house is worth X, but it's really not. The comps in the area don't support it. Or maybe the house needs some work, and you want to get started and you want to actually own the asset, but you don't want to pay all of the money down in one payment. You want it to cash flow. This is great for creating cash flow. And so what you do is you agree on a price and you make payments to the seller over a specified period of time. So it's not all at once, and you can actually cash flow. And the cash flow would be the difference between what you can rent the property for, whether it's on Airbnb or direct to a tenant, and what you pay to the seller every month.
So essentially, the seller becomes the bank.
Exactly. The seller becomes
Yeah.
the bank. The seller becomes the lender. How about that? Does that make sense to everybody as well?
Yes.
Yes, but I have a question, John.
Absolutely.
You said who pays the taxes? I missed that part. My phone was going in and out.
Typically, you'll pay the taxes if you're doing seller finance because you own the house. So it's the same situation where the seller deeds you the house. I could probably add that to the slide, but it's the same thing. The seller will deed you the house. So you own the house. You're responsible for the house. They become the bank. They're no longer responsible for the asset. You own the asset. You're just making payments to the seller. So
Okay.
you're responsible for the taxes, the insurance, everything.
Okay.
So essentially, your contract becomes your mortgage.
Come your mortgage.
Correct.
Yeah. Yep. Got it. Thank you.
Let
And
me
it
ask-
has to be free and clear, right?
No, that's a great question. So it doesn't have to be
Nope.
free and clear. And what we'll talk about in the next
I
slide.
thought Pace said it has to be. I thought he said that, no?
No. So if a seller has equity on the mortgage and they sell you their property, let's say that they want to sell the house for $500,000 and they've got a mortgage of $450,000 remaining. That's their balance due, and they have $50,000 worth of equity. $50,000 is 10% of $500,000. So they've got 10% equity, and so you'll be paying them on their equity. So it depends, and this is really like higher level stuff where it gets into how you structure your agreement. But it's not mandatory that the seller own a property free and clear to do seller finance. Are these slides like actually giving people clarity? Like, that's my question. Do people feel like before they joined this call, like they were a little unsure of exactly what Subto was, exactly what seller finance was, but after seeing this and having it explained to you, do you feel like you have a solid understanding of what these two different types of creative finance options are?
I think it's very simple, it's straight to the point, and that's what sometimes simplicity is better. So I say yes on my end.
I agree.
Agreed.
Agree.
Yes, yes.
I agree as well.
That's awesome. Okay, now what we're going to hop into is the last type of creative financing that I want to talk about tonight. There are different types of creative financing strategies that we haven't covered. And I don't want to overwhelm anybody with just one call. Like, too much information is not good. Like, you should be able to grasp concepts that are not too difficult to understand and then start to think about how you can apply them when you're talking to sellers. And then we'll get into that and we'll have open discussion and stuff like that. I'd love to hear what everybody has to say. I love to talk. I love to present, but I also love to hear feedback. I love to hear what everybody has to say. I love to hear questions, and I love to give everybody clarity. I love for everybody to come to a mutual understanding. So let's hop into what a wrap is. So a wrap is when you combine subject to and seller finance by taking over the existing payments to the bank and making payments to the seller. What are some questions about what a wrap is?
So you would be paying the mortgage and paying the seller for the part of the mortgage they already paid?
Precisely. So you're making payments to the bank because they still have equity due, or they still have balance due on the mortgage, and then whatever equity they have baked into that, you're paying them off.
Okay, cool.